Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. Why did Daniel Dubois handle the big occasion so much better than the more experienced Anthony Joshua? Well, you may remember I uploaded this video 2 weeks ago asking whether Eddie Hearn was projecting his own fears onto Daniel Dubois because he was constantly saying in the run-up to the fight that Dubois was going to freeze, that the occasion was going to get to him. He just kept banging on about it over and over again. And to me, it started to sound like wishful thinking. And if you were really that confident in AJ, you wouldn't need to be wishful. So I saw that as a sign that Eddie was not only nervous himself, but that he was actually concerned that AJ might be nervous as well. And so he was trying to project all of that onto Dubois. The vast majority of the public, including myself, and the vast majority of experts, were not only picking Joshua to win, but win by knockout. And of course, AJ knew that. When he addressed the audience at the weigh-in, he told them that they put a lot of pressure on him, and he asked them to pray for him. I mean, that's a sign that someone's feeling the pressure, if ever there was one. But what is pressure? What does that actually mean? Pressure, in this particular context, is simply the fear of what the public will think about you if you lose. That's all it is. The fear of what the public will think about you if you lose. And the more conclusive the loss, the more critical the public will be, and therefore, the greater the fear. You see, most fighters are not actually afraid of being beaten up, knocked down, or even knocked out per se. Most fighters have been beaten up and dropped in the gym, but they'll still turn up to train again the next day in many cases. What they actually fear is being beaten up or knocked out in front of an audience because they care about what the audience thinks about them. And this is what causes some fighters to freeze on the big occasion: stage fright. Now, if nobody thinks you're going to win, then you might feel less pressure than your opponent because the audience aren't expecting much from you. They're not going to be as critical of you if you lose. But there's still going to be some criticism. There's still going to be memes and jokes and mockery if you get knocked out. And that's upsetting to a lot of fighters. And the bigger the event, the more of that there's likely to be. But some fighters, and I want to say it's a minority of them, do not give a flying off about what the public think. Like they genuinely, right down to the core of their soul, don't give a off. And that allows them to cope with the big occasions much better. When Derek Chisora signed to fight Vitaly Klitschko, most people expected him to get blown out early. He'd only had 17 fights and none of them on such a big stage. Most people thought he'd freeze and get chinned inside 4 rounds. That's what most of the public and the journalists were saying at the time because that's what had happened to so many other Klitschko opponents. That's what we were used to. I predicted that the fight would go late, but Klitschko would win. I repeatedly said in the run-up to that fight that Chisora definitely won't freeze, despite what other people think. He's going to bring the heat. And the reason I was so convinced that he wouldn't freeze is because I'd seen him do certain things up to that point in his career, which convinced me that he genuinely did not care what people thought about him. For example, he once kissed an opponent on the lips at a weigh-in, like a passionate kiss. It was crazy. It's a much bigger deal for an African man to do something like that than it is for a Western man to do something like that, because understand the context. Derek Chisora is from Zimbabwe, not somebody born in Britain to Zimbabwean parents. No, he was actually born and raised in Zimbabwe. Now, Zimbabwe is a very conservative country. It's not like South Africa, which is all liberalized. No, Zimbabwe is very conservative, very traditional. All that rainbow alphabet stuff is illegal over there. If they catch you engaging in any of that rainbow activity, they'll put you in prison. That's the culture that Derek Chisora comes from. Yet and still, he kissed another man on the mouth in front of thousands or millions of people. Now, I'm not saying Chisora swings that way necessarily, or maybe he does, I don't know. The point is, he did not care how his actions would be perceived by other people, including other Zimbabweans. Didn't care. And that told me right there that he's not going to care what a boxing audience think of him. This man's not going to freeze because he don't give a damn. Now with Daniel Dubois, I think there's something similar going on. He's not an extrovert like Chisora, he doesn't do all the crazy antics, but like a young Derek Chisora, he seems similarly unconcerned with what the public think of him. Here's a guy who, despite being a millionaire, still lives at home with his dad. Many people, including myself, have speculated that he may be on the spectrum. Jarrell Miller publicly mocked him for being mentally slow and only recently losing his virginity allegedly. But Dubois wasn't triggered by any of it. He didn't even show the slightest hint of being bothered. He laughed it all off without a care in the world. And that's the operative word right there, care. Dubois knew that a lot of the public had the same perception of him that Jarrell Miller had, but he didn't care. He genuinely did not care, and that helped him to stay focused on the task at hand. I suspect the only opinion that Daniel Dubois actually cares about is his dad's opinion. As long as his dad's happy, I think he's happy. That's the way it comes across to me. And to some extent, I think that actually works to his advantage. He's not boxing to try and impress us, the boxing audience. No, he's doing it for himself and his family. This is in stark contrast to Anthony Joshua, who's almost the polar opposite at this stage. He cares far too much about his public image, how he's perceived by other people. This is why he gets so nervous. He keeps going on about being underappreciated and not getting the recognition he deserves. And that's what seems to be motivating him to keep on fighting past his sell-by date. He doesn't need the money, but he cares so much about what people think of him that he's apparently chasing an immediate rematch with a guy who just destroyed him in a one-sided fight. This wasn't like the first Ruiz match, no. Dubois-Joshua was completely one-sided. It was a demolition job. It was like what Zheli Zhang did to Deontay Wilder, worse even. I think AJ should retire right now, but to play devil's advocate for a second, perhaps he performs better as an underdog because there's slightly less pressure. I'm not saying that he would, I'm just putting it on the table as a possibility because I know some people are going to mention it. I was amazed at how many of my subscribers voted for AJ to carry on fighting. Presumably many of them think he can do better against Dubois second time around. I just think that AJ will always be limited by his own psychology, and I don't think that he can fix that now at the age of nearly 35. If it could be fixed, then it would have happened already. Anyway, give me your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll catch you on the next one. I'm out. Are you sick and tired of the mainstream mindset? Does the dogmatic conformity and pathological ignorance have you tearing your hair out in frustration? Then don't be alone. Come and join our brotherhood on Patreon. We stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. You'll gain access to my weekly topical podcast where we take more deep dives than Jacques Cousteau on an endless variety of subjects. There's also videos, interviews, live Q&As, as well as a vast back catalogue of previous episodes, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen via the Patreon app or download in high-quality MP3. Connect with myself and hundreds of other members in our Element chat group. There's no contract, no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a Mickey D's McMuffin. Just head to my Patreon page via the link below this video and select the tier called the Brotherhood of Reason. I'll see you over there.